Um, so the chapter that we agreed to start with is key role plays in departments in a clothing or in a fashion industry. So as this industry has been traditionally driven by manufacturing, and it was traditionally started in the United States, something that we discussed early in the year, where consumers developed their strong voice and they demanded products that manufacturers were not making. Because obviously, when you run a business, you make sure that you make something that is convenient for you as a producer or a manufacturer. And that is what consumers raise their voice about. And this brought about a shift in the whole industry, specifically the fashion industry, to move from a manufacturing economy in which retailers they sell their fashion items to a market driven economy in which consumers um, told these companies what they wanted to buy. So in this industry that we are in, um, it is basically a company or an organization that is engaged in some sort of commercial enterprise, and this is related to or can be related to one or all of the above, which is your apparel, it can be accessory, or it can be the textile industry as well. Now this structure covers your retailers, it covers wholesalers, it covers manufacturers, your designers of apparel, or it can be designers of accessory products. And at the same time, um, well, I think I've just repeated in this next line is where it encompasses again your designers, um, and the designers that are responsible for accessories as well. Now, when we're speaking about a business, and like I said, I've just mentioned your fashion, it can be a clothing business. I'm just speaking about fashion or starting from there is because this is where it starts from. And then there are four distinct levels: there is primary, there is secondary, there is retail, and then there is the auxiliary level. Now, this is what a standard industry or business in our field of clothing and textile would look like. Now, your primary is obviously your producers or growers, the ones who are responsible for producing the basics, which is your fiber. It can be leather, it can be fabric or fur. And then secondary is the ones who are responsible for using primary goods and making a final good or a semi-finished good out of it. Okay. Then we have your retail, which is the level that directly channels with the consumer, and the auxiliary level is the one that simultaneously functions with all the above levels. So it is your support, it is to do with advertising, it is to do with your visual and fashion consultants, it is to do with researchers in this field. So all of these form part of your auxiliary level. Okay. And then this is how an organizational chart looks like. I took this from one of the books, and because it actually has broadly covered everything. When there might be companies who don't perhaps have all of them, but this is how most companies would have, or a standard or a medium sized company would at least have. So your first day is the stakeholders, then we have a board of directors, there is the CEO, and then comes the different departments. And there is a layout. If you see the arrow, it is in a certain direction, and also it's again on the other direction, which means there is bi-directional flow of information in this organizational chart. So we have finance and accounting, we have sales and marketing, there is design, and now design is responsible for trend forecasting and product development. Then we have sourcing and production, there is logistics, there is quality assurance, there is corporate social responsibility, there is sustainability, there is wholesale, there is business development, your IT, we have HR, legal and security, and investor relations, which is more or less PR. Okay. So this is how a basic company in the field of clothing and textile would look like in their organizational chart. So we're going to, in the further slides, discuss a bit about each of the departments that form part of this organizational chart. Now, zeroing down to the departments that we have within a clothing company. Now, there are various departments, okay, and it depends also if a company is a publicly traded company or if it is a private company, if it is a small sized company, and what these departments do, or how do they function, and how do they interact in the overall supply chain. If you remember in the second semester, sorry, in the second term, when we were discussing about the role players to the supply chain, there were internal role players and there were external role players. Now, these departments and their contribution form, in a way, the internal role players of the supply chain who are contributing to the overall supply chain. It is to also see how companies have structured themselves and how equally important this aspect of organization function is and how they operate. Okay, it also involves about the interrelationships that exist within one organization or across multiple organizations in the supply chain as well. Okay, so we start with the different departments. So as you can see in the slide, there is finance and accounting, there is business development, we have corporate social responsibility, sourcing and production, there is HR, there is IT, we have wholesale, there's sales and marketing, we have design, and then we have investor relation. So to start with finance and accounting, this department basically they work in conjunction with the CEOs or with the president in order to develop a top-down budget for the organization. And then they're also responsible for the finance and accounting department is to make sure that they communicate with each individual department in terms of what amount of money needs to be allocated in order to achieve the overall goals and objectives. And that is why they do have budget meetings, this share reports, they monitor and revise what was asked of them in the budget meetings and how much of it is needed, if it is overspent or underspent. And then they have like few of the key functions. One of them is compliance, because they need to meet the requirements or regulatory bodies or government regulations. They also have to manage and control. They can't just decide on the funds that or the budget that is needed and then allocate it, but also they have to manage and control to make sure that they are monitoring and that these budgets are meeting organizational objectives and not misused. Then they need to have a strategy and risk so that they can inform, they can influence their perspective, and also which is going to lead towards the development and implementation of the strategy. Also to manage risk, because if they are updated on what's going on, the risk can be mitigated at an early stage and not let go out of hand. Then funding, obviously, because of the role that they play as a department, they inform and they engage with investors and funders, current and potential, to obtain and maintain the financial resources for the organization or what is best for the organization. Okay, so they also play, as you can see, important role in any company, medium or large size businesses, and it is vital because it determines their success or failure with the funding that is one of those critical functions. Um, so I'll just give an example. Say, for example, there's a company by the name X, and they receive an order of 10,000 shirts, which they sell to the retailer at $10 each, which is like a 50% markup. Now the order is 100,000. Which means the order adds to $100,000 to company X, and it needs to spend $50,000 to finance the order. Now, the retailer needs the delivery by a certain date, say 1st of September, and the company receives the order sometime in, say, June or July. So now the company has to produce and finance that order approximately 2.5 months prior to shipment, and the retailer's conditions are about 60 days from the receipt of goods is when they're going to pay back. So that means the company X will have to put out that $50,000 on a full 135 days prior to being paid. So, which means if one magnifies that by hundreds of orders that is coming to a company, one can see how important the finance function is and how it is related to the rest of the organization, and that how it contributes to the supply chain at this very beginning stage, um, or at the very early department that comes um, directly in contact with contributing to the supply chain. Then we have sales and marketing. So without obviously the team of sales and marketing, the company would also not find any orders to produce. So marketing is also a very important part of any business activity. It is what it creates customers. It is what it makes to generate income. It is also guiding future business prospects that might come up. So it's a combination of a lot of things. So the marketing department as such makes sure that they build a good relationship with the audience, which means they create awareness what is going to come, or what do they see or expect, uh, or will expect as consumers from their company. They try bringing in new customers through their advertisements, through their marketing strategies. They create new business opportunities for the enterprise. Then involving the customer, where you engage customers through your videos or through your advertisements, or you monitor what is the current competition going on. You create new ideas out of it. You identify the strategies. You identify what more you can do to involve customers and retain them. So you in a way are promoting and establishing the business at the same time. Then generating income, obviously now you have done all of that, you pulled in the mass, they're interested, they want to buy, but that is not where the marketing job ends. You have to also aim for selling those products, which means you have to generate revenue for the company. Now, if you can see, they are playing their role throughout the supply chain, from creating an interest to pulling in consumers to making sure that those consumers that are loyal, or new consumers that are coming into the company, they are not just getting an exposure, but at the same time they are buying their products as well. So all this is kept in mind, broadening the customer base and finding opportunities that would create revenue for the company. So that is your sales and marketing, and how they are contributing simultaneously support to other departments and to the organization as a whole. Then we have our design department. Now, design again relies on sales and marketing, what they have advertised, and keeping that in mind, they try developing ideas and concepts through trend forecasting and through product development. Now, obviously, trend forecasters you would know are the ones who predict colors and fabrics and textures, the materials, the prints, the graphics, the accessories, street styles, and any kind of styles that is presented on the runway, so that they can be put in stores for upcoming seasons. Now, product development is where we have product developers. They work to make sure that the profitability and the quality of fashion items that they are responsible for producing is achieved, and they oversee that these day-to-day operations are achieved through the idea that they have given to the company. So the design team is relying on the marketing and sales team, and at the same time it's feeding back to the teams that are yet or awaiting on their part of the work or their contribution to the objective or the goal, in this case for the company. um, the trend forecasting, we spoke about it, so I don't think I need to elaborate more. You all are part of the company, so you would have much better and finer ideas than mine. um, what else I wanted to say, that the product development teams that create products, they will also sometimes act as a standalone department, or report to the design department. So they most of the time might not be part of their design. There might be an individual department. Now, that again depends on the size of the company, if it is small or big. So, they have to feed back to the design department. Then we have sourcing and production. Now, this sourcing and production has many subsets under it. It is logistics, it is quality assurance, it is your corporate social responsibility, it can be sustainability, it can be legal and security as well. So if you see all these key departments, they interact with the supply chain at such high levels that each of these in itself becomes like a department, but not necessarily they will all be operating as individual departments. They can fall under overall sourcing and production and be sub departments. So communication between all of these that I mentioned is paramount, because once an order is taken by a company and the sourcing and production department is now deciding that they have to place it in a specific factory, the logistics must get involved to ensure that the goods are shipped in time and that the customer needs are met. So then, do they have to fly the goods or they have to ship it through a large container ship? Then now that answer depends on the size of the order or the ability of the factory to meet the production schedule. Okay, so communication is required from sourcing and production because it is critical to decide on the cost between sea and air, and also between the timely completion. So C can be much more common and cost effective, but if the order was taken by the marketing and sales team with the criteria of air freight in mind and costed using C, then there would be a large discrepancy, because it will affect the final cost of goods and it will create an issue. So, quality assurance plays a major role here to provide that confidence in the finished product, that our product will be finished on time and that we will make sure that it is qualitative and can be shipped immediately and not held back due to quality issues. Now, the question that needs to be addressed at this stage is, who is going to make sure that the inspection of goods in the factory prior to the release of shipment from the producer is being done well. Now, that will be your factor that will have cost consideration and can affect the time of delivery. So, your medium to large size companies, they produce products in hundreds and then in thousands and across hundreds of factories across the globe. And having individuals from the home company present in each factory is not actually possible. So, the inspection companies or agents are often used who can carry out this quality assurance because the moment you touch a product, it costs money. So, it has to be someone who is there, who has been part of the process and is a quality individual with expertise in that angle and can give his or her expert feedback or professional feedback. Then we have corporate social responsibility. You say corporate social responsibility or you say sustainability, it depends what the department is or has named it, or perhaps both. They also play a major role in the in the supply chain because they have to deal with many issues, and especially if it is large companies, they have housed their CSR department in their legal office because they look at it at a legal standpoint. Corporate social responsibility is to do with legal, um, it's to do with public relationships, it's to do with if not all the CSR rules, but also with a lot of them. In the past, there has been issues or conflict of interest between sourcing fabrics from certain parts of the world and the corporate social responsibility, because the sourcing department, they have the responsibility to place orders in factories that could deliver at a certain price, and that was within a certain time frame as well. And that is not always the case, that these factories are fully vetted from your CSR perspective. And in some cases, they are seen that they are violating your human rights. So, but times have changed, and your public opinion and consumer demands have also impacted the entire CSR discussion in a positive way. So there are still, bad actors in the industry that place business in factories which are not fully CSR compliant. But slowly that number is declining because they see almost all companies, to save their back from the legal costs, are moving on to adopting companies or factories that are CSR compliant. So that is a good thing. So, and as you can see, because this speaks to the supply chain as well, because if there is delays, if there are legal issues, matters to do with jurisdiction, perhaps, and then that delays the whole process, and you might end up losing your important client because that client is not responsible for you choosing a certain factory that is not CSR compliant. You haven't done your job and haven't checked the facts and figures. So it's again contributing to the external supply chain as well. Then we have wholesale. Now, the wholesale department in any company would be the one that is responsible to sell their items to other retailers and even to their own outlet stores wherever it's applicable. And that affects the supply chain through the sourcing and production department. Why? Because by placing the orders for merchandise, you will see that they have already been approved in the clothing line, or they have been approved by potentially working with buyers to develop a new product. So, if at a later stage the wholesale department would also be communicating with the product development team, and in some cases with the design department also, they need to make sure that they are talking to each other at all times. Because if there is any messing up in the setup of the wholesale department, then one of the main factors that will be affected is sales. And now here the focus is on sales, and that is why there is an intermediary by the name of wholesale who is responsible for managing that, so that we get quicker returns on the revenue that we have invested. Then business development. Now, the business development department has a significant impact on the supply chain, and in some cases, it is influential also in sort of directing the company to redefine itself or restart itself from ground up. So, for example, if there is an existing company, okay, and that focuses on one aspect of the fashion industry, which, or one aspect of the clothing industry, which might create a brand extension by adding a new line. It can be a new women's line or a men's line of product, or going into accessories business if the main focus is apparel. So, with addition of this new business that is quite unfamiliar to existing organization or to their structure, there is a need to redefine or create a new supply chain. So, it is important again communication of the plans prior or during the discussion of how a new business development can be critical for a successful transition. So, business development team and their impact to within and outside the supply chain. Then we have IT. I even don't feel that we need to talk in detail, but I will still, because IT is one of those sectors or departments that is mostly overlooked but is the most needful at all times, because all of these work and departments and discussions happen through the use of IT, which is always overlooked, and at times we take it for granted, because it has the ability to transform how companies do business nowadays. What else? With IT, it is incorporated. It is a part of a strategy, which is we call as a digital strategy in the supply chain, because through them we run our softwares, through them we run our emails, through them we run our business basically, and most of the time our major deals with major suppliers and buyers. Then we have, I've put them together because they more or less do the same, is your HR, human resources, public relations, and investor relations. Now, human resources, one of, not the last department, but is one of the vital departments that plays a critical role of hiring the right people, putting them in the right position that they that not deserve, but that they fit into and at the right time with the right cost. Um, so, for any large companies, multinational companies, it can be a big challenge because At any moment in time, there might be thousands of employees in dozens of companies, dozens of countries, and not only having that right person is important, but also providing that framework for communication can be challenging because of language barriers, because of cultural barriers. um, so spending time and resources for earning that sustainable workforce for any company that is a leading company or is perhaps visualizing themselves to be a leading company is important. So that time and resource and effort that is being put is going to bear fruits in future through these individuals. Then we have in investor relations, it's more about providing information, it's more about providing services. It is about also dealing in conjunction with the public relations department, where we shape, sorry, the public opinion of the company, what public thinks of it. Or it is also about providing positive news on the company's corporate social responsibility practices, as well as general news that companies might be interested, consumers might be interested in about the company. How often do we all even check on LinkedIn or company website as to what progress they are making, or what do we see is happening, or what might be interesting for us, but be it for knowledge purpose, be it for information, be it for research purposes, there is always an interest of consumers about companies and their whereabouts. And at the same time, the flip side happens as well. There is also um, misleading news, and at times they are questioned on to their motive of why they have advertised in a certain way, or how they have made sure that their CSR policies are the right way approach. Or at times the PR department is called into question in terms of disputes or negative information that has arisen surrounding the supply chain, or if something has gone wrong in the overall process. Okay, so that was to make sure that they practice fair and sound corporate social responsible policies, and make sure that the information that they are sharing, the people they are hiring, are actually adding on to the benefit of both parties and not just the company. Then, in a nutshell, I know we spoke about communication right throughout the slides, but communication among departments is important, and the communication cannot have one direction. Remember, in the figure that I showed, the two arrows facing clockwise and anti-clockwise, there has to be bi-directional flow of information. There has to be um, a s- there is no such standalone department that is not reliant on the next one. So we have to make sure that as departments, we cannot work in silos. We have to be reliant on the next or the previous department, because we all have one critical goal in mind. And there has to be transparent communication, and that can only happen if we have trust, respect, and honesty amongst each other. Because at the end of the day, yes, there will be discussions as grapevine, or discussions as part of word of mouth. There will be gossips, there will be things that will happen individually, but at the end of the day, the outcome is for us as individuals to earn a salary at the end of the month, to live a life, and then for them to generate profits. Whatever else happens other than that is just part of what we say as your discussions through the grapevine, or it would be office politics, that at times we use terms like these. But if the process is transparent, or is tried to keep transparent at all times, then no matter what discussion is generated, or where it leads to, it will always be fruitful at the end for each and every one. Okay, so that is all about the chapter. Thank you for listening, and I will speak to you again soon.